before she got into the judiciary, she threw the case out. So unlike Buffalo, where they started with the actual victims' identities and worked their way up to the traffickers, the jesters, here in Minnesota, we're absolutely sure we know the names and identities of the traffickers, but in 2 years, Rob, we haven't been able to identify or help one single victim.
Wow.
That's what has made me so concerned and so determined here. So the way my civil case is proceeding in the federal court here in Minnesota, I'm on a collision course with the jesters, just like when I learned to drive a car. If they think they can get out of this, we're going to find out. I don't think that they can even give a deposition, let alone testify in court, without taking the Fifth Amendment, given the results of the last guilty plea in Buffalo. I think the world has changed for them, Rob. And that's what we're going to find out. Are they right? Can they still get away with stuff? Or has the world changed and it's now the jesters against the FBI and a growing public outrage that modern-day slavery is being allowed in North America and elsewhere in the world?
How many victims do you think there are when it comes to human trafficking that are directly a result of the Shriner human trafficking connection?
I don't know an exact number, and I've worked on this, and if I get one, I will certainly share it. But out in Buffalo, Mr. Stebick, who was the law clerk who drove his motorhome and actively practiced human trafficking up and down the East Coast into Canada while the motorhome was in transit and transported a number of the victims, they forfeited his motorhome, which was worth about $300,000, and used it to compensate the victims and help them establish a new life under the what's called Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which is a very strong United States federal law. It's stronger even than the Mann Act was in terms of assisting victims. So I guess there was maybe 15 victims that got compensated by his $300,000. And they didn't get all the victims, and they certainly just got started on the jesters. There was more jesters who resigned. There's more jesters, apparently, according to the FBI, Rob, who's got ratted out by the jesters in Buffalo, including some here in Minnesota. So the table's set, but I don't have an actual number. It could be 200 or 300. It could be several thousand. But the thing they have in common, which I am concerned about, which I hope to expose here in my civil case in Minnesota, I think the jesters have a modus operandi, Rob, and they may have different players with different powerful positions in every jester organization, but they all do the same thing. They keep the lists of their potential victims, they force them to participate, and those victims virtually can never escape. And a lot of them are illegal aliens who were falsely brought to the United States or Canada and can never get treated right. They can't get out. So whatever the number is, I hope we can identify here in Minnesota that local jester court number 53, which has about 19 or 20 jesters in it. I'm going to try to force out in federal court the names of their victims. That's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to do my absolute best to see if the judge will cooperate with me, and let's identify who these victims are from just Minnesota. And if that works, then let's extend it to some other jester courts around the United States. And I'm going to try to go as far as I can with that, Rob.
Now, just let me see something here. If we were to take a look at what human trafficking is in this case, how would you describe it?
Well, what it really is, it's a convenience for the jesters to fit their goals. They have that, make-believe world that they live in for mirth and merriment, which is really books of the play, which is really human trafficking parties that are held virtually every month somewhere and at various scopes and sizes. So I think what human trafficking is, it's really a power deal to these men. I don't think it's really sex per se or anything like that. It's just they become quite successful in business, and here's another way they can control a big part of their life, and it makes them feel very important and special. And I think that's really what's going on. So I think what human trafficking is, it's a way to, in most cases, exploit illegal aliens who were falsely brought into Canada or the United States and who were promised that they could have a new life, they could have jobs, they could bring their families, they could get citizenships and everything else, none of which ever happens. So I think it's like a make-believe world that when I think back, guys in junior high were learning to grow up better than this, I think.
Right. So basically, we're not talking about slavery here. We're talking about sexual trafficking.
Well, you're talking about actual slavery. I mean, this is all the experts categorize human trafficking as modern day slavery. So it's their whole lives are controlled, Rob. They in most cases pay a fee to pay for their lodging, their food, whatever. In other words, they can never get ahead. It's like as you load 16 tons in the coal mines, and you owe the company store your soul. These are not. This is not a contractual deal. These victims don't have the power to bargain. Jester girls are forced to do all kinds of unspeakable things, and they are forced again month after month after month. And there's this wonderful organization called the Polaris Project, which you guys are featuring over time, and Sandy Frost is going to be, I hope, featuring more in it too. We talked to them out in Washington, D.C., and they're kind of the national and international focal point for getting help and getting data on human trafficking. And they thought that Jester girls, victims, should be able to have been able to call up. And I asked them, how many Jester victims have ever reported to you they need help? And the answer was none. So in about 100 years of Jester operations, maybe anti-trafficking has been active for about 25 or 30, not one single victim of the Jesters has ever been able to get help except in Buffalo, Rob, where they got the victims first and then leveraged up to get the Jesters. That's modern day slavery. This is not a sexual thing. It's their whole lives are controlled, and I don't see how they ever could get out unless something breaks, like what we're trying to do with your show. You know, let's kind of go out and lets it happen now, because I think it's poised to happen. I don't know, but I certainly believe the world is different according to Jester now. 4 guilty pleas and lots of ratting out, and the FBI affidavit has changed the whole world now.
How is this going to affect the Shriners? There has to be a large number of these people who are doing everything they can because they've got good hearts, good intentions, and they're doing everything for the right reason.
Yeah, but here's the deal. When I think back, born and raised in Chicago, lots of inner city experiences, biracial, all kinds of other things, experiences. Segregation in the United States, the excuse was, give us time, we'll straighten it out ourselves. Separate but equal became the mantra, and so on. The Shriners have had probably 4 or 5 or more years where rumors and now the actual guilty pleas have surfaced. And the reaction of the Shriners and Masons has been, well, we should be able to clean up our own mess. The problem is, Rob, that the Jesters control those organizations, at least as to the Shriners. They control everything. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm a friend of the Shriners. I'm going to do everything I can to save the Shrine organization, but I don't think it's going to exist the same way it's always been. Their membership has been struggling to be maintained. Their endowments have lost billions of dollars. Their children's hospitals are not being funded the way they should be. Sandy Frost reported on fraud in the burn treatments programs and so on and so on. I think the Shriners have to, in a sense, man up and say, either you guys all quit the Shrines, get the Jesters out now, or we're going to quit the Shrines and start over again in organizations that don't have this thing. It's almost, there's no middle ground left anymore.
Right.
So this is why I'm going to focus on getting the Jesters out, take a bunch of the Shrine endowment and preserve it for the children's hospitals, take some more and pay off the victims of the human trafficking, and now let's see if the Shriners can survive. I think they could.
Well,
not with the Jesters running everything.
I've seen some documentation that where, in certain cases, less than 1% of all the money raised actually goes into the hospitals, and there are some Shriners there that are making and taking out a hell of a lot of money.
It's atrocious, and this is one of the things that I got onto back here in Minnesota. The Minneapolis Shrine is called the Zurah Shrine, Z-U-H-R-A-H. And it was a huge, big building, an old mansion, which was expanded to have parties and entertainment and all kinds of things. And guess what, Rob? With a lot of members, they were going broke. Somebody was taking the money out of that Shrine organization. That building has since been sold to St. Mary's University for developing the St. Mary's campus in downtown Minneapolis. And one guy who I know personally who had loaned the Shrine $1 million hasn't even been paid all his money back yet.
Wow.
They can't account for the money. They can't account for the missing monies. And you're talking about it at the national level and the children's hospital levels. So the Shriners really have been getting away with something for a long time where their image is charitable, And Sandy Frost, of all people, was very respectful of that. She was getting criticized for attacking the Shriners. She wasn't doing that at all. She was saying, hey, what's really wrong with it? The same way the little couple here in Minnesota was saying. There's something wrong here.
There's something desperately wrong. At Exonation, if you'd like to see the articles that Sandy Frost has written, we've compiled them into an electronic book at www.xzonenews.com/ROJ. That's www.xzonenews.com/ROJ. And Sandy, we're trying to get a hold of you to bring you on the show, but until we do, I know that you're going to hear this. Thank you for the great work that you've done. You've done a fantastic job. And that's what true journalism is about, bringing out the stories that need to get out. And this is one story both you, Mike, and Sandy have done a great service to everyone by exposing what goes on in these little meetings. And, some of the stories that we've heard over the past week when it comes to the Shriners and other organizations that apparently do on the outside everything good and for the right reason, but there are those in the organizations who have a totally different venue.
It's been shocking to me, and I think the real concern, which I have, I'm trying to use my little civil RICO lawsuit. I call it little because even though I lost a year's worth of income, basically, to me it was a lot. It's dwarfed by the numbers in the human trafficking, the children's hospitals. I mean, my monies don't compare to that.
Yeah.
But as I'm sharing with you, I'm trying to use my RICO lawsuit as a can opener. And if I can show that there's a modus operandi that was used in Buffalo that was virtually repeated here in Minnesota, I'm going to see if the federal judge under the federal RICO statutes, there's a section called 1965 B and D, and it's called the ends of justice. And if the ends of justice require our federal judge here in Minnesota to reach out and touch somebody anywhere in the United States and possibly other places, that judge can do so. They can summon the people here. They can put them into the witness stand. They can do all kinds of things. And I'm going to see if I can do Minnesota first, and then maybe I can get a little farther. I don't know how far. I don't know if I can do Minnesota, but I'm sure going to give it, not just the old college try. I'm committed to fight to the end on this. There's no middle ground on this thing, Rob.
It seems that those who thought they were untouchable in today's society are finding out that they're so wrong. Look what happened at Penn State. They were fined $60 million. They were stripped of all their titles. And who would have ever thought that the great Penn State would fall? But it has.
It has, and bless the Paterno family, because I'm sure he never intended for all these things to happen, but his stature's gone. What's going to happen to the jesters? They had a fake organization to begin with. They didn't even have the benefits of being a real college or anything like that, Rob.
All right, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take our final break. Exo Nation, Mike Blodgett is our special guest, and of course Mike will be on again with us in the future as this story continues. It's not going to go away, Exo Nation. We're going to make sure that we do our part, like Mike is doing his part, and like Sandy Frost is doing her part to get this story out to the masses. Mike and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break. Don't go away.
And take long naps, go from my hard work.
With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com. whentechfails.com and www.matstein.com.